All right, hey guys, Mr. Brotherton here. We are going to be talking about DNA structure, genetics, which leads to heredity, and all kinds of really cool stuff. This is the stuff that leads to all the big, cool sci-fi movies that are out there, like Gattaca and currently Westworld or the show Devs, if you guys have been watching that. But more importantly, what we're going to be talking about today is not the scientific questions, but kind of the ethical questions that come up because of the things that we're learning in science. So let's kind of get into that. So, what's the deal with DNA? Why is this stuff so important, this little molecule so important, and why do we place so much emphasis on it, and why have you guys already heard of it, even though you really don't know how it works yet? Okay, so what DNA really does is it's just a molecule that makes proteins. Okay, all a gene is just a very specific little stretch of DNA that says, hey, body, this is how you make a protein. All right, so all of those different little proteins add up to make something that looks like you. So if you look at the kind of stuff I have on this slide, DNA is able to make this planaria worm here. It allows it to basically get cut up into 200 and some different pieces, and each one of those pieces will actually grow a full-size clone of that worm. So you can take this worm right here, you can take a razor blade, cut it into tons of little pieces, and because every single cell in your body contains all of your DNA, this little dude can actually just grow a clone of itself, a whole bunch of clones. All right. Down here, I have a picture of Dolly the sheep. Dolly was the very first cloned mammal in the world. So what they did is they took a piece of tissue from a sheep, they implanted it in the egg of another sheep, and they were actually able to grow a clone. So there were two identical sheep walking around. One of them that really maybe shouldn't have been there. And then this picture right here is an electron micrograph of, actually it's transmission electron microscope, sorry, of the current SARS-CoV-2 novel 2019 coronavirus. So that's actually what you're seeing here is the coronavirus. What you're actually looking at is a little protein capsule, because that's all a virus is a little piece of protein. And then on the inside, there's just a bunch of rogue DNA. Okay, so how is it possible that this thing, DNA, is able to allow this worm to make tons of clones of itself? How is it possible that DNA allows us to make a clone of a sheep? And how is it possible that DNA, or in this case, RNA, a very similar molecule, allows a virus to kind of take over your body? So it has to do with the structure of DNA. Oops, let me go back. It has to do with the structure of DNA. It's basically a molecule that's kind of the same thing as a language. All right. Each one of these little pieces here, 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 and here are basically a letter. And if you put three of these together, it actually makes a word. All right. And that word, if you stick enough words together, now you have a sentence, and a sentence has a meaning. So if you stick enough of these little guys together, you end up getting something that says, hey, this is how you make a protein. So what's going on with a virus? A virus works exactly the same way, all right, as your body normally would. The difference is, if you look here, this virus doesn't have all of the machinery necessary to kind of do this process that we're going to be learning about in depth. We're just kind of getting the really quick version of it right now. But a virus has DNA or RNA just like how you do. And what they do is they enter your cells. If you look here, then they basically trick your cell into doing their bidding. So they take their DNA, they implant it in a section of your DNA, and your body, when it's kind of just doing its normal processes, it will start copying this, And then what happens is it makes a copy of that. It leaves the cell's nucleus. It goes over here and it starts making proteins of that virus for the virus. Then once the virus's DNA has been replicated or RNA and it has all of its protein made, it'll go over here to this thing known as your Golgi apparatus. And this guy's kind of like the Amazon fulfillment center of your cells. And it basically just packages everything up all nice and neat. And usually that's a good thing, because if you're making a protein in one cell that needs to really be in another cell, your body can package it up, put a stamp on it and say, hey, you go over here. A virus kind of hijacks that same exact stuff, and it takes the Golgi apparatus and is like, hey, package me up. So that's what happens. It gets packaged up and we get a bunch of copies of a virus. So how does that relate to what we're seeing today? Well, this brings us to the question of bioethics. So it's kind of a scary word, but it's not that bad. Let's first look at something kind of funny or darkly comical, depending on your position. Hold on. So I know this isn't social studies, but it's important to kind of remember that science evolves in the society that it's from. So let's take a look at this meme really quick. So it says 45,525 deaths due to COVID-19 in the United States, meanwhile in Florida. And it shows a bunch of people hanging out on the beach, and instead of throwing a beach ball back and forth, they are throwing the coronavirus back and forth. So kind of the reason I'm showing you this is a meme is maybe our generation's version of a political cartoon. And I know you interpret these in social studies from a historical perspective, but it's good to start maybe analyzing the things that are happening in your daily life as well, because to quote the History Channel, history is made every day. All right, so what are bioethics? Okay, and why are we talking about this? So because of that simple little DNA makes protein thing that all life is doing, just because of that little rogue piece of DNA, because that's all a virus is a little rogue piece of DNA getting in your body, because of that simple little molecular machinery, it's having huge consequences right now in our society. And we're kind of at a crossroads right now in the United States as to whether we should reopen the economy, and you can see people protesting that we should reopen the economy because they're currently being harmed because they're not getting paychecks, or do we need to suffer through that in order to save lives? So this brings us to bioethics, or ethics in generally. So what we usually learn about in science class is understanding what something is or how something works. So most scientific questions view a phenomenon and they say, what the heck's happening here? What's going on? Okay? Ethics is about understanding what people should do, and not only what they should do, because you could say you should brush your teeth, right? But that's not very powerful. So ethics is about understanding what they should do and why. Why should you brush your teeth? Because it's good for your health. All right. So a scientific versus an ethical question. So a scientific question would be, what are the physical risks of using steroids? An ethical question would be, should athletes be allowed to use steroids? Okay. So another kind of a couple versions of that same thing, some more bioethical questions are, should vaccinations for all subjects or students be mandatory, even when some parents object? Or should we modify a mouse so that it can produce human antibodies? Or should we make dogs glow? We can, but should we? That was my cat. He has strong opinions about whether dogs should glow or not. So next slide. Why are we talking about this? Why am I bringing this up? Some of you guys found out when you tried to look up test answers and roundly got them wrong. All right, science isn't simply just a set of facts that you can easily look up on Google. All right, it's a process that is happening all the time. It's a way of kind of knowing the world, and sometimes the way we come to see and know the world interacts with economic, political, and social issues, which is what we're seeing now. Human society is a little bit messy. All right, so when you start thinking about science this way, how it's impacting all these other things that you learn about in school, history, or things that are happening in English, any of that kind of stuff, the reason I'm talking about it is because if you don't go on with science into college or as a career, it's still going to impact you. So what we're talking about now is how do you make informed, thoughtful choices? Um, how do you learn to talk to people about their ideas? And how do you kind of learn to reason through situations? So what is ethics? Ethics is really just the science of moral reasoning. So how do we come to reasons that justify actions, right? So how do you recognize that there's an ethical dilemma or question in front of you? Well, the first thing, the easiest way is anytime you're confronted with a decision and one of the outcomes or both of the outcomes are going to lead to some harm or disrespect or maybe disadvantage certain groups, you've probably come to an ethical crossroads, right? You could think, should I go back to the freezer for another bowl of ice cream? I've already had 3 today. Okay, let's see if that's an ethical question. It kind of is. Is it good for you to have a 4th bowl of ice cream? Probably not. You're harming and disrespecting yourself, possibly. But on the other hand, ice cream is delicious. Okay, so that moral or ethical dilemma is not that profound, but there can be more profound moral and ethical dilemmas like should we reopen the economy despite the fact that it might end up killing people. All right. So after you've asked yourself, okay, am I confronted with an ethical question? The answer is yes. Then you have to ask yourself 3 more questions to come to a good answer. All right. So what are the relevant facts? So you need to gather facts related to your question. Who or what could be affected by the way this question gets resolved? So if we go back to my ice cream thing, who could be affected? Me. All right. What are the relevant ethical considerations? So respect for people, the minimum harm versus maximum benefit. If you take economics, you'll talk about this, like return on investment. So how do we maximize the benefit for the most number of people while minimizing the harm to the most number of people? And then finally, another ethical consideration would be fairness. So in our discussion today, this is what I want you guys to tackle. What is our ethical question? This is the big one in the news right now. Should we end stay-at-home orders and open up the economy? All right. So I've posted another meme here. If you don't get the reference, it's to a TLC song from the 90s. You should school yourself on 90s R&B and pop music. But right here, you have 2 people who are confronted with the same moral dilemma or ethical question, bioethical question, and they're coming to different conclusions. So why is that? Why are they coming to different conclusions? This guy right here, he's a healthcare worker, him and his girlfriend. I think this was in Columbus, Ohio. They were protesting the protesters who wanted to open back up the economy there in Ohio. All right, and you have this woman here who clearly feels that the economy should be open. All right, so healthcare workers clearly on one side, very clearly, this is a very obvious visual metaphor. They're on one side. She is in her truck holding her sign coming down on the other side of this. So what's our ethical question? Should we end stay-at-home orders and open up the economy? How are we going to answer that question? We're going to answer it by researching relevant facts. We're going to determine who is going to be harmed or hurt or possibly benefit from opening the economy back up. And then we're going to see, well, how might that affect people? How can we maximize our benefits, and is it fair to people? And then I want you guys to come up with your answer. That's what you're going to be doing today. All right.